It's tax season, a time of year to practice both responsibility and procrastination. Seriously, everybody hates taxes, which is why when you eventually do pay your taxes, you hope that your money is put to good use. Education, welfare, road maintenance, things that do a lot of good for a lot of people. So if I told you something along the lines of $1.2 billion of tax funds are going to profit McDonald's every single year, you probably wouldn't like that. And unfortunately, this is true. Let me explain. The way McDonald's profits on our taxes is that they don't pay their employees a living wage. And because of that, 52% of McDonald's employees need to get some form of government aid, such as food stamps, Medicaid, and childcare. And funding for these programs ultimately comes from our tax money. McDonald's isn't doing anything illegal by any means. They're paying their employees the minimum wage, and in theory, the minimum wage should be enough to cover the cost of living for a single person, or even a small family. But as we can see, in practice, it's not enough for over half of McDonald's workforce. Over half of McDonald's employees need extra assistance, and we are the ones being held responsible for supporting them. And I fully support these programs. They help a lot of people who need it. But ultimately, McDonald's is the one profiting from all of this. Every dollar they don't pay their employees is a dollar that a taxpayer is going to have to pay. If we divide up that $1.2 billion going to support McDonald's employees among every taxpayer in the United States, we would find that each taxpayer is contributing around $7.19 to support McDonald's employees, more than enough to buy a Big Mac meal. If we shifted the responsibility, even partial responsibility, to McDonald's, they would have to pay more to their employees, and we would have to pay less on taxes. That's how McDonald's profits. They aren't held responsible, and that responsibility has to come down on someone, and that someone is us. McDonald's is saving money by passing us the check, but there is a solution that makes sure McDonald's employees are taken care of and saves you this money on your taxes. We raised the minimum wage. I used McDonald's as an example, and that $1.2 billion sounds like a lot, but that's nothing compared to the $153 billion of tax money going to support the employees of minimum wage jobs across the country. Wendy's, Burger King, Wal-Mart, basically every minimum wage job is like this, meaning that if you pay taxes, you are contributing an average of about $917 every year to compensate what these companies don't pay their employees. Raising the federal minimum wage shifts the responsibility, less on the taxpayer and more on the companies that are actually hiring the workers, meaning you can keep your $917 and the companies will pay it instead in the form of wages. And minimum wage is a hot topic right now. There's a lot of people proposing a minimum wage of about $15 an hour across the United States, and there's also a lot of criticism over raising the minimum wage. First criticism: should a low-skill job be enough to support a family? Does a McDonald's employee deserve to make a decent income? Yeah, why not? They're human, and they deserve to live at least a decent life if they work decent hours. Janitors used to be able to support their families. Why shouldn't they be able to now? I'd rather their company pay them instead of the cost falling on me and everyone else who pays their taxes. Second criticism: raising the minimum wage would affect small companies. The federal minimum wage is currently $7.25 an hour. If we raise this to $15 an hour, that means a small business could only afford to hire half as many workers, which would affect their chances of surviving as a business. But then is it fair to let the employees of a small business go under the poverty line? To let them go through the stress and worry that comes from not making enough money to pay rent every month? Even if they get financial help, it's an uncomfortable situation to be in when you're worrying about supporting yourself and your family. Do we let the employees suffer to help the businesses? I don't think that sounds right. Now, I do really like small businesses, and I love it when a good small business succeeds. I just also believe in economic Darwinism. I want them to succeed if they do something good or bring something new and fresh to their community. I want to support small businesses, but this situation isn't giving me an option of who I'm supporting. Each individual taxpayer is having to pay on average nearly $1,000 a year because of the good small businesses and the billion-dollar companies, all to compensate their employees' low incomes. And for those reasons, I still think the minimum wage should be raised to $15 an hour. Or we could set the minimum wage lower for companies with less than a certain number of employees. Like if a company has less than 10 employees, the minimum wage could be $3 less per hour. There are states that have policies like this. It's a great option we could go with. I'm just not a fan of it personally because I don't think it sounds fair to the employees. But I want to throw it out there because you might feel differently and I wanted to offer alternative solutions. Now let's move on to the third criticism of the $15 an hour wage. My whole selling point for this has been that you, the taxpayer, would save money by raising the federal minimum wage. But there are people who object and say that actually the reverse would happen, that you would have to pay more taxes if we raised the minimum wage. In my research, this has been one of, if not the biggest critique of the $15 an hour minimum wage. The claim is that raising the minimum wage encourages employers to hire less workers, which in turn increases the rate of unemployment, increases the amount of government support that needs to go out to people who are unemployed, and raises the taxes we have to pay to fund this government support. So is this true? Well, why don't we look at the data? If this claim that raising the minimum wage raises the unemployment rate is true, then we should see a direct correlation between the two data points. If the minimum wage goes up, we should almost always see the unemployment rate go up as well. I made a chart comparing the unemployment rate and minimum wage for each of the 50 states, where the x-axis is the minimum wage, the y-axis is the unemployment rate, and each point is a state. I also included Washington, D.C. because honestly it should be a state by this point, but it also has the highest minimum wage in the United States, currently at $14 an hour. As the chart shows, there is no correlation between the minimum wage of the state and its unemployment rate. You get high and low unemployment rates no matter what the minimum wage is. There is no clear line you could draw out of this. Now, this evidence supports the idea that it's not the minimum wage that causes the unemployment rate to go up. It seems to be the economy as a whole that determines the unemployment rate. And this seems to be supported if we divide this chart by region. Each region of the United States has a different economic ecosystem, and no matter what the minimum wage is, the unemployment rate of each state stays pretty consistent. There is no positive or negative correlation between unemployment and minimum wage. There's just no correlation. But we're not talking about state economies, we're talking about the federal economy. There's a huge difference looking at states versus the states. So just to see if this claim carries over, I put together a little graph that shows the federal minimum wage, the unemployment rate, and the minimum wage adjusted for inflation in the US. This graph goes from the years 1942 to 2018. And I love this graph because it's a gold mine of information. If we look at all the years when minimum wage was raised, we can see that there are both instances of the unemployment rate also going up, as well as instances of the unemployment rate going down or not changing at all. This further supports our claim that there is no correlation between raising the minimum wage and the unemployment rate. And this graph also shows us why some economists might be afraid to raise the minimum wage today. From 2002 to 2018, the unemployment rate has been steadily declining except for years when the minimum wage was raised. There, unemployment rate only went up. Based on this recent trend, it makes sense why people are afraid to raise the minimum wage. The current state of our economy punishes us when we try. But I don't see this as a reason to not try to raise the minimum wage. I see this as a reason to fix other areas of our economy. There are clearly times when the minimum wage went up and unemployment went down. This shows that it's not the rise of minimum wage alone that raises the unemployment rate, it's a whole stew of economic factors mixed together. Everything in the world economy is so connected, and there are so many factors out there that we have some idea of how things work, but we have no idea about how everything works. So based on the research I've done and everything we've talked about, I think that we should raise the minimum wage so that companies and businesses hold the responsibility of supporting their own employees, and so that responsibility doesn't fall on the public. But the recent trend shows that when we increase the minimum wage, the unemployment rate goes up as well. So we can't only change the minimum wage. We need to change other factors in the economy as well so that we can keep unemployment low while paying workers enough to survive on their own. We've seen that this is possible in our own country, and there are lots of other countries that do make it work. Luxembourg and Australia have the highest minimum wages in the world, $13.78 and $12.14 per hour respectively, both of which have unemployment rates of 5.6 and 4.2%, better than the unemployment rates in the United States from 2008 to 2014. And Washington, D.C. is actually planning on being the first in the United States to have a $15 an hour minimum wage starting July 1st of this year. And similar to Luxembourg, has an unemployment rate of about 5.4%, which has only continued to go down over the years despite its high minimum wage. Economics is complicated, but we're coming up with new theories every day to explain how it works. The important thing is to test those theories and look at data, trends, and counterpoints to find the answers. And there may come a day when we have an economic theory of everything, and then we'll truly know what the heck is going on here. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye! I was planning on talking about this peak on the graph, 1968, because this year had the highest adjusted minimum wage in history, $11.55 per hour, as well as a low unemployment rate of 3.4%. But I opted to leave it out because this year was in the middle of the Vietnam War, and the low unemployment rate was likely due to drafting. Just to let you know, this video starting with McDonald's almost turned into talking about war economics.